Hey there, Pokefans, welcome back to a brand new video. My name is Matt, and I am going to give you guys the team breakdown of what I used for the Portland Regional this last weekend. Kind of the reason why I took off so much time from creating content, it was to focus on this. I wanted to have the best possible outcome for this regional because I wanted something to prove to myself. I wasn't planning on winning. That was not the plan. I didn't need to make it to day 2. I didn't want to win the tournament because if I did, I would have an invite to go to Worlds, and I realistically just can't do it. So there's no reason for me to compete to win. Although it would have been nice, but I'm not going to try something that I know that I'm not there for. Instead, what I wanted to do was prove to myself that I have made the correct changes, that I made the best choices, and also that I can also break my habits. You guys have seen it before. I just randomly click something like, oh yeah, no. Take my time, figure out what I could learn, what I could benefit from, and go from there. And that was the goal. And I'll tell you what happens at the end. For now though, I'll go ahead and give you guys the team breakdown of what I used for the Portland Regional, the reasons why I picked them, and what they were countering or just trying to set up so that I could possibly overcome my best challenges or even the worst ones. Let's first start us off by our prankster Tailwind user, because that's kind of my playthrough, and it's going to be Tornadus. Tornadus himself is pretty simple. With an EV spread of 252 and special attack and speed, with timid nature allows me to be able to set up Tailwind without anyone being able to stop me, with one exception. That is Whimsicott. Whimsicott does outspeed me, so I can't do anything about that. I went in with the Focus Sash instead of the Covert Cloak for one specific reason. While Fake Out is still all over the place, and multiple Mons can use it, I can bring in a move called Protect to stop that turn 1, which then will allow my opponent to get stuff done. But in the event that I'm just going to say, you know what, I don't need to worry about this. If I can bait the Fake Out, or if they don't even have Fake Out, I need to be able to outspeed one Pokemon specifically, and that is Shadow Rider Calyrex. With the Focus Sash item, I was able to take a hit from Shadow Rider, get my Tailwind off to allow my entire team to be able to outspeed that Pokemon specifically. To stop other pranksters from hitting Tornadus, I went with Terra Dark. This way, Encores don't do anything to me, Thunder Waves don't do anything to me. If people were using this, can't remember what the move is, Sableye used it a lot, that wasn't going to affect me. Anything that had a status move would not touch Tornadus, and in one particular fight, became really, really useful. The move sets that I used after Protect and Tailwind was Bleak Wind Storm, because it is a spread move, and Taunt. Outside of having Indities and Farigiraphs, Taunt was rarely used. I couldn't use it when I could have when they had protection against priority, so in that regard, Taunt was kind of useless here. But I didn't want to have another move that could be used to either downsize my opponent's speed, like Icy Wind. I didn't really want to bring in another move like Scary Face, because that was also something I thought about using. And I also didn't really want to use like Air Slash or just anything in general, in the event that if I needed it, I could have it. But if I didn't need it, I figured Taunt being on this Pokemon would be very beneficial. Since I wasn't really running into a lot of Indities or Farigiraphs, I did run into some, but not as many as I would like. So Tornadus, while being a Tailwind user and Bleak Wind Storm user, did come in handy with Taunt whenever I needed it, which wasn't used very often, and Protect to stop him from taking any damage that was not needed at the time. Now, one of my other Pokemon buddies does give Tornadus a little bit of a boost, but I'll mention him a little bit later. Now you might be wondering, where's the other 4 points? I didn't decide where it went. Initially it was supposed to go into HP, but it just didn't. So he just had the 252 and special attack and speed, and he was perfectly fine where he was at. Zamazenta is the next Pokemon that we use for the Portland Regional. Someone I've been using actually for a couple of seasons now because of Wide Guard and his other additional boosts that he has. Now, while recording content, his EV spread was different. I had sat down and made a very calculated formula for Zamazenta to be able to do the very best that he could do against the Pokemon that I felt were going to be very, very apparent. And I was Right. I did mention this in the episode, but it's like Calyrex X, and there was a lot of Calyrex X teams being used. However, there was also Koraidon teams, Miraidon teams, and Lunala teams, and some Tropicoses. But if you go off of day 1 and day 2 usage, you kind of see in the top 8 of the restricted format, there was quite a bit of Pokemon that was used quite often. But the reasons why I picked Zamazenta was to counter specific Pokemon completely. Body Press counters most Ursalunas, doesn't always get the one-hit KO, but gets really, really close, and I found this out by doing the testing that I did. Even with the HP boost being at 252, but the defenses being 252, I love having the ability of being like the 261 or the 219 after the +1, but I was still not able to get the first hit KO on either one of those mons. So I decided to change his moves, not only his moveset, but his EV set as well. With Body Press taking care of the majority of the fight because he gets a immediate defensive boost and is able to counter at least normal types this way, I decided to go with Behemoth Bash. So I went with Iron Head with this. This counters specifically fairy types, and a lot of the time it got the KO. Even with Lunala with the shield broken, it got the KO. So it wasn't really hard to do. I also went with Crunch, and Crunch allowed me to do damage against dark types, ghost types, well, not dark types, but ghost types and psychic types. And that amount of damage was significant enough for me to be able to get the KOs to that. Again, Lunala's the best Pokemon that I compare it to. After the shield is broken, there is an 80 to 102% chance of getting a KO, if not slimmer than that. I think the margin is 7 to 9%, I think, to be able to get the KO. Now, I'm not saying like, oh, it's like 7 to 9% for an Oko. I think it's either 87 or 97, and then it goes above. If you hit Lunala with anything else and then Zamazenta crunching it afterwards, will get the KO on that Pokemon. So ghost types, psychic types did have to fear Zamazenta quite a bit. Normal types and people who use Terra Normal also had to fear Zamazenta quite a bit because of Body Press. Dark types also had to worry about that as well, as long as they didn't have the fairy typing. And steel types also had to worry about that quite a bit, all because of Body Press. Behemoth Bash was for the fairy types and people that use Terra Fairy. That was able to get the KO pretty easily, and unless they neutered it by, intimidates or anything like that, it was full damage all the way around. So that was Zamazenta's biggest counterplay to a lot of those Pokemon. And his final move is Wide Guard. While he's equipped with the Rusted Shield, gives him that fighting steel typing that we want. We gave him Terra Fighting so that we would also take advantage of the damage boost of Body Press to be able to KO more often of the normal types that are currently far against us. But the new EV set that we did with Zamazenta is the 252 in HP, 244 in attack, defense, special defense, and speed are all set to 4. The nature is sent to Adamant. That gives us the 188 for the attack, the 199 for HP, and everything else is pretty standard after that. We did this on purpose so that we can outspeed other non-speed invested Zamazentas. We also did this so that we can be as offensive as possible while providing a wide guard solution to people who are either scarfed, specked, or banded that use spread moves. Once we figured out what that was, we would be able to use that in accordance. Kyogre was also a very interesting build, as they come up as our third person that we've added to the team. I went with a Salt Vest build to take less damage from not only Miraidons, but Raging Bolts, but during the play I found out that I wasn't able to survive, and that's just because of the fact of the field that was placed on the field. The moves set were Water Spout, Origin Pulse, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam. The ability is automatically set to Drizzle. It sets the weather, but the Terra Water and the Assault Vest allowed me to be able to survive quite a bit, as well as do optimal damage to my opponent without a problem. I went with a little bit more of a bulkier set But with that being said, I did as best as I possibly could for the Pokemon that I have. I went with a 252 in HP, 76 in defense, 164 in special attack, and 12 in speed. Setting it with the timid ability nature, allowing me to be able to outspeed just a little bit of the Kyogres that invested 4 or maybe even 8 or possibly even more or less of Kyogres. Kyogre specifically was to be the Pokemon that would break the board while doing as much damage as possible. At level 50, we have 207 HP, 120 defense, 191 special attack, and 123 speed. Now, I do have 4 spots open, and I did look at the calcs to see what this could have been put towards. It could have been put towards special defense or something else on the calculations, but I felt like the set that I currently have was able to do a lot. And when Kyogre came onto the field, it did incredibly well so that we can actually do a ton of damage to what we were trying to do. Initially, it was supposed to be modest, but I felt that timid would help out the party just a little bit more to be able to beat out consistent Kyogres, but not by much, but just to be able to outspeed them just slightly so that I can take care of business. Now, the Assault Vest was specifically to withstand a lot of the moves that have come out from Shadow Rider, Lunalas, anyone that realistically takes advantage of special attacks. Raging Bolt was not a consideration for this. My biggest counter was going to be Rillaboom and Ogerpon, and that is because of the fact that both Pokemon, if done well, can OHKO Kyogre with no problem. I still went with Terra Water knowing that, because if I'm able to either outspeed or ignore priority by any means necessary, then I would be able to hit the Pokemon on that side of the field and not have to worry about anything. That was the kind of movesets that I went with. Water Spout to immediately do the fresh start of damage that just chunks people's HP away, with the Origin Pulse following after that. I went with Thunderbolt instead of Thunder because I wanted to make sure that I was able to consistently hit outside of whether if they brought in Koraidon, Torkoal, Tyranitar, anyone that swapped the weather heavily dictates what move's gonna hit next. So I wanted to go with that and do the best possible damage that I can do with Kyogre in the little time that it was going to be relying on the field. While it has like the biggest bulk out of my entire squad outside of maybe Zamazenta, it was able to take quite a bit of hits because of the Assault Vest. And because that Assault Vest was really helpful during special attackers, not necessarily for physical ones, we were able to actually get a lot of more stuff done. It was able to survive on the field at least 3 to 4 turns. So if I was able to hit everything, I was looking golden, because I was in the rain, Terra Watered most of the time, and I was able to hit things incredibly hard because of the spread moves. So that 75 damage that most players would get is actually not, probably around like 80-85, just because of all the boosts that's added to it. The thing that's about Kyogre is that it's not specifically meant to counter anyone that is out of the obvious. It really doesn't do anything outside of just being able to do a lot of damage to fire types, do a little bit of damage to grass types or anyone that's weak to ice, and it can do some damage to water types, but it's not supposed to. It's realistically supposed to be taken apart of, or taking advantage over the 2 watery moves, which is Origin Pulse and Water Spout. Outside of those 2, Kyogre kind of falls short. And like I mentioned before, Rillabooms and Ogerpons are able to KO it with no problem, so it kind of sucks using this Mon, but it was the best option that I had when I wanted to figure out what is the best options going forward and doing damage to teams that I may or may not be seeing in the tournament. I know I saw like a bunch in the ladder, and I wanted to do the best that I could to get the team done and do the best that I can to actually show that I knew what I was doing. So Kyogre wasn't supposed to specifically counter anyone except for just a general like Terra Fire type, and maybe just do damage to maybe ground types if that was a thing. But I just wanted to be able to do a crap ton of damage in a short amount of time and force my opponent to kind of pick and choose what is going to be the best there. But I didn't have a way to stop fake outs. I didn't have to stop intimidates or even stop pranksters with this Pokemon, so it was kind of hard. But once it got started, it was really, really hard to counter. Our fourth placement was Ogerpon Hearthflame. I went with Fire Ogerpon because she was able to do quite a bit in testing. Unbeknownst to a lot of people and even myself, I found out the hidden gem of what Ogerpon could truly be. Since it's a fire type, Ivy Cudgel becomes a fire type move. That means grass types, ice types, and there was one or steel types were heavily affected by what Ogerpon can do. Horn Leech to use for water types, ground types, and I think that's all. But with Horn Leech, I'm able to regain HP and do a crap ton of damage to a lot of the Pokemon that is weak against that. And then we have Stomping Tantrum, which is a ground type move to handle the poison types, the electric types, and the fire types. Since I am a fire type myself, I don't do as much damage to that Pokemon as I would like to, but I had been running into a lot of Terra Poison types on the ladder, so I needed to have a ground type move to deal with those, and thankfully, in one of my matches, it paid off super well. Now you might be asking yourself, why was this like the hidden gem? Let me cook for a minute. While the initial ability is Mold Breaker, if you use Embody Aspect, the entire Mon becomes alive. It gets a +1 every time it hits the field. Someone figured that out during the tournament. That was really, really funny. But gets a +1 to all of its attacks. Ivy Cudgel, for my knowledge, OHKOs, all entities, all Farigiraphs, with no issues after the Ivy Cudgel has been set. Outside of weather, it knocks out all the supportive Pokemon that set up Trick Room for not only Lunala, but it will also do it for Ice Rider Calyrex. Horn Leech will OHKO Urshifus, even without the Terra, but it will also OHKO Kyogres and Ice Rider Calyrexes if they're Terra Water. Ivy Cudgel can still KO Ice Rider Calyrex if it's not Terra'd, but I need to take care of the partner because they usually do the follow me stuff, and then Calyrex is usually open up for a lot of scrutiny and be able to take a ton of damage. Stomping Tantrum may not always KO the typical fire type, but it has a lot of power to be able to KO Pokemon like Iron Hands, even with the Helping Hand ability, and it will also KO Miraidons with no problem with that same ability. This way, with the +1, it allows Ogerpon fire type just go ham on your supporters without even attempting to take any damage at all. While it can be taken down by the Cornerstone Ogerpon, by anyone using rock moves, and even ground type moves, this Ogerpon can easily set up to where you can just start taking names almost immediately. I have it with the 252 attack and speed and 4 in defense. With the Adamant Nature bringing our attack at level 50 at 189, that's not with the +1, and 162 in speed, leaving everything else around the same. Since it has to hold the Hearthflame Mask, it is automatically the fire type, so the Mold Breaker ability and the Embodied Aspect, giving us that +1, is already preset. We can't do anything to change that. So unfortunately, while we can't change anything much about Ogerpon, the set that we currently have and have been using thus far has been incredibly strong, and it would not be something that I would really downsize from. If I had to make changes to this Ogerpon, it would just maybe give it a little bit more health, but I don't know if I'm willing to make that sacrifice since I can't do anything to change the moves or the item that it has to hold to give it a little bit of a boost. But specifically, this Pokemon counters a lot of the setup Pokemon outside of Cresselia, and you have a higher chance of survival with Farigiraf as long as you're using Miraidon and the Electric Seed. Otherwise, this Ogerpon is going to knock you out and you're not going to be able to do anything anything about it. Bringing up our 5th slot, we had Flutter Mane with the Terra Fairy Booster Energy combo because we can't change the ability of photosynthesis. We walked in with Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, Shadow Ball, and Protect. We went with a typical spread of 252 and special attack and speed, with the 4 and HP being set to Timid. So we have the 307 speed right off the bat, and we can go many different ways that we want to after that. Flutter Mane's role is just to hit spread moves on everyone, rocking Terra Shield for Terapagos, rocking the Shadow Shield from Lunalas, and if I needed to just hit anyone specifically that I know has the Focus Sash, Flutter Mane was able to do that because it's going to move first, and there's not a lot of Pokemon that will beat it outside of Iron Bundle. And even with Pokemon that can use Sucker Punch or priority moves, will not always get the KO on Flutter Mane. It is a likely chance that it will survive with 1 to 2 HP or even more when a lot of that stuff comes out. So I had it one game where it was targeted specifically and was able to get the KO right away, which sucks, but if they can dedicate that much to go on that Pokemon and then I can do whatever I want for the turn, that was pretty good. Otherwise, Flutter Mane was not as helpful as I would like it to be in this tournament. I did run into a couple of Grimmsnarls, but I did not bring in Flutter Mane to really counter Grimmsnarl, which is kind of a bummer. And every time that I brought Flutter Mane in for its general counters that I had set up for, it didn't really get to do anything because priority, realistically, be able to KO the Pokemon. And when I had to swap it in to take a hit for someone else, it wasn't surviving anything. Because of the booster energy, we were able to outspeed Miraidons and Shadow Riders, but we weren't able to really take advantage of that speed if they were automatically KO'd by, let's say, a priority move or by other means that the other player was able to do. In this tournament, it felt like Flutter Mane was a clutch. While Flutter Mane can do damage against the dragon types, which is essentially what it was brought for, be able to KO the Raging Bolts, the Miraidons, the Koraidons, and it was able to do damage against the Golden Go, the Shadow Riders, and Ice Rider Calorexes. No one used those Pokemon that I was able to actually take advantage of the weaknesses. Miraidons terrestrialized either electric or fairy. Shadow Riders terrestrializing ghosts. Ice Riders did water. There wasn't a whole lot that I could really utilize Flutter Mane for, so a lot of the battles that I had, I wasn't able to really use it hardly ever, which is unfortunate for me because I wanted to be able to use it all the time to get the set up stuff. But when you have to take both your legendaries and then 2 other Pokemon, you kind of have to pick and choose who has bigger priority and valuability, and that Flutter Mane wasn't it. So if I had to name off a Pokemon that I would need to swap out immediately, that would have been Flutter Mane to bring in someone else that was equipable to do everything, to do anything else, but unfortunately I was not able to do that. So while it sucks that Flutter Mane got the shorter end of the stick on that, but it was not bad enough to where I had to kick it off for the tournament. I was just upset because I wasn't able to utilize it, and because I wasn't able to, it felt like it was dead weight. Last but certainly not least is Chien-Pao. Chien-Pao is a Pokemon that I've been using for quite some time, giving the boosts of damage that people could receive because of the Sword of Ruin ability that cannot be changed. It was pretty interesting to me. The set that I went with Ice Spinner, Sucker Punch, Sacred Sword, and Protect. And I also used the Ghost Terra type so that physical attackers couldn't really hit me with like either Fake Out, Drain Punch, Close Combat, etc. Now, Chien-Pao is still weaker to be able to get KO'd by most Urshifus, depending on the set that they're using. A lot of the times I've found in the tournament was a banded set, and it was just doing so much damage. There wasn't a whole lot that I could do to not take damage from Urshifu. So I just went with what I felt was more comfortable. I went with the 4 HP, 252 in attack and 252 in speed, making myself the Jolly Nature to give me the 205 speed, a 172 in attack, and the 156 in HP. With Ice Spinner, Sucker Punch, Sacred Sword, and Protect, I was able to not only protect for a turn if I needed to, Sacred Sword to take down Terapagoses with all their boosts, which then gets ignored, as well as other normal type Pokemon that can take a lot of damage like Ursalunas, and just sets me up a little bit better. Sucker Punch to take down everyone that is low HP, and because everyone loses 25% of their maximum defense value, it made it so much easier to get to KOs. And obviously Ice Spinner so that we can get rid of the terrain and I can hit a lot of formidable foes with this move. The general counter that Chien-Pao was able to do with the item that was equipped, which is the Life Orb. Life Orb allowed me to be able to get one-hit KOs on a lot of different Pokemon, including and not limiting to Raging Bolt, Rillaboom, Amoonguss, anyone that uses the Grass Terra type. I was able to KO not only Shadow Rider Calyrex, but Ice Rider Calyrex if they were planning on using a physical move. I was able to counter Miraidons, and until they were Terra'd, Miraidons. So Dragon types, most of them were faulty at first. Ground types were also faulty at first before the Terra type. While I may not be able to do a lot against the Fairy type Pokemon, I put a lot of other Pokemon under pressure. Pokemon that usually team up with Chien-Pao is Whimsicott to give it the Helping Hand boost, which then allows even a terrestrialized Miraidon to fall to its knees to Chien-Pao. Chien-Pao with the Life Orb was able to get a lot of KOs on the Pokemon that realistically it shouldn't have. I sacrificed the ability of having to be able to survive more than one move, but if I'm able to survive one move and I get an additional attack, not only take out the terrain that was there, but I'm also be able to do a lot of damage to a Pokemon that realistically should be able to survive more than one move, but because of the Life Orb and the damage that I take per hit, it allows me to just do a little bit more damage to push the percentage a little bit more my way so that my resources don't get wiped out as fast as possible. And that is my team. I hope that I gave you guys a little bit more details of what I was looking for when I was to counter what I could be seeing. I was really happy to find out that I was correct when I made the declaration that people were going to be using Calyrex and X. Lunalas were all over the place still. They were part of the top 20%. Calyrexes were part of the top 20. Miraidons were top 48. It came up to deciding whether or not that you either wanted a fast Pokemon and a slow Pokemon, or two fast Pokemon to outspeed the slow Pokemon. And it was really, really interesting to watch. It's safe to say that although I had no want to win, I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to make sure that I was able to break my habits, take a look at the team in front of me, build an effective strategy to try to overcome them, and build a team, and no matter the circumstances, be able to walk with my head held high and try my best. I wanted to prove to myself that I can actually play Pokemon and do the best of my ability, and I feel like I have. Yes, it sucks to lose, but I had a better ranking this time than I did last year. I went 2-7 because we had 9 rounds of Swiss last year, and this year I went 3-5. Mind you, I had to do 8 rounds, up to 24 battles. I did 22 of them, and I went 9-13, which is typically what I see when I play on the ladder. Sometimes I do incredibly well, and then sometimes I don't do incredibly well enough. But the difference between playing on the online ranked ladder when it's close sheet, I have to play in a tournament where it's open sheet, which means that the level of play is on a completely different level. You have to look at what your opponent is bringing on to be able to decide whether or not that you had to be able to beat them in some way. It was kind of intense when you had to just try to figure it out. And a lot of my matches, it went down to game 3. Out of 8 matches, 2 of them I got swept on, and only 2. So 20% of my matches I got swept, 2-0'd. I didn't make a good enough play. I couldn't counter something. I just couldn't do anything, and I lost. But the rest of them, they went to game 3s, which means if they won one or I won one, they battled back, I battled back. It went back and forth. Sometimes I won and became the winner. Sometimes I lost and didn't take it. Do you know what? I'm okay with that, because before I got 2-0'd a lot. I also didn't understand what the new Pokemon did. I also didn't understand what my strategy was going to become because I didn't know what my matchups were. I didn't understand what I could do good on and what I couldn't do good on, and that was hard for me. But not this time. This time, I stood my ground. Exhausted after 7 rounds, I played my 8th match, and I won, making it the 3-5 record. And again, I didn't need to win. I understood why I didn't. A lot of people use these regional tournaments to kind of test their teams in open team sheet brackets, because players now agree that while you can get a lot of work done on Smogon and using Showdown system, you can change things pretty easily on the fly, which gives you not so good ratings for how your team is going to go, because it's like you're investing the thought process into them and how things look good on paper. But once you start getting the team together, you realize maybe that's not what it's like. And there's been a few times where I've even accused the systems not being correct to begin with, because moves like Retaliate or even Metal Burst are even calced correctly, because they're not going to show you how much damage they do, because why would they? It's kind of hard to set that up in a battle calculator if there's no real way to go, okay, well, they hit me for this, drop me down to 1 HP, I live because of Sash, so what should Metal Burst damage be? It doesn't show that. Abilities don't always prop up and show what they could be doing. The umbrella, the utility umbrella, the thing that we tested for, I think it was either last season or the season before, it doesn't tell you in the game that whether lowers the attack of the Pokemon. The battle calcs don't show that because not a lot of people use it for testing. Airlock, instead of taking all of the weather away, it only takes the effect of the weather away. Same thing as the utility umbrella. There was a couple of Rayquazas that did show up in the tournament, which I was really happy for. I wanted to see what creative people were going to do. And there were some other players that were super excited and was like talking to me about my builds after that. And I had a really good conversation. And again, I showed off what Ogerpon can do, and they were super excited. I want you guys to try the team themselves. So at the end of the video, I'm going to post the rental code so you guys can use it yourselves, try out the team, let me know what you guys think. I thought it did incredibly well. I think that it, in the hands of a player that is probably more better than I am, will make it worth their while. But for me specifically, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. My team was good, it was strong, but there were just other better teams or players that had better knowledge of the matchups. There are changes to be made for the team. It's never going to be the case, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. And with that, I'm out. Thank you all for watching. Here's the rental code, and I'll see you all next time when we come back and play more ranked battles using a team that we built from scratch. Take care, everyone.